Maya Rodriguez wiped down the same coffee-stained table for the third time that morning, her movements automatic after 6 years of serving breakfast at Rosie's diner. The October rain drummed against the windows of the small establishment tucked between a laundromat and a used bookstore on Maple Street. She glanced at the corner booth where he always sat, the quiet man in the worn leather jacket who ordered black coffee and wheat toast every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 7:15. What she didn't know was that in 3 weeks, she would make a decision that would change both their lives forever and discover a secret that would turn everything she thought she knew about sacrifice completely upside down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Chen had been coming to Rosie's diner for almost 2 years, ever since his diagnosis changed everything. The small, family-owned restaurant felt like a refuge from the sterile hospital corridors and the endless medical appointments that now dominated his calendar. He appreciated the predictable routine, the way the waitress with the kind smile never asked questions about why his hands sometimes shook, or why he looked increasingly tired each week. Maya had noticed the changes in her regular customer. The man she privately called Tuesday Thursday had grown thinner, his complexion taking on a grayish pallor that reminded her too much of her late father's final months. She found herself lingering by his table, refilling his coffee cup more often than necessary, making small talk about the weather or the daily specials. There was something about his quiet dignity that drew her in, the way he always said please and thank you, the way he left exactly 20% tip, even when he barely touched his food. Marcus worked as a software consultant from his apartment, a job that allowed him the flexibility to manage his deteriorating health. His kidneys were failing, a consequence of a genetic condition that had claimed his mother at 52. The doctors had been clear about his options. Dialysis could buy him time, but without a transplant, his prognosis was measured in months, not years. He had been on the waiting list for 18 months, watching his energy drain away like sand through an hourglass. The diner served as his anchor to normalcy. Maya's genuine warmth reminded him that life still held simple pleasures worth fighting for. He looked forward to her recommendations for the daily special, the way she remembered he preferred his coffee without sugar, how she always made sure to save him a piece of apple pie when they were running low. These small kindnesses meant more to him than she could possibly know. Maya lived in a cramped studio apartment above the flower shop next door, splitting her time between the diner and night classes at the community college. She was working toward her nursing degree, driven by the same instinct to care for others that made her such a natural waitress. Her younger brother lived across town with his girlfriend, and her mother had moved to Phoenix for her arthritis. At 28, Maya felt caught between her dreams and her circumstances, saving every penny for tuition while wondering if she would ever break free from the cycle of minimum wage and exhaustion. The morning everything changed started like any other. Marcus arrived at his usual time, sliding into the corner booth with the newspaper tucked under his arm. Maya approached with the coffee pot, ready with her usual greeting, but stopped short when she saw his face. His skin had taken on a yellow tint, and there were dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "The usual?" she asked gently, though concern crept into her voice. Marcus nodded, but when she returned with his breakfast 10 minutes later, he was slumped forward slightly, his breathing labored. The newspaper lay forgotten on the table, and his coffee sat untouched and growing cold. "Sir? Are you okay?" Maya set the plate down and moved closer. Marcus tried to smile, but the effort seemed to cost him. "Just a rough morning. The coffee smells good." But Maya had seen enough sick people to recognize the signs. Her father had looked the same way in his final weeks, the life slowly draining from him, despite their best efforts to pretend everything was normal. Without thinking, she slipped into the booth across from him. "When's the last time you saw a doctor?" The question caught Marcus off guard. In all their brief interactions, she had never asked anything personal. He studied her face, seeing genuine concern rather than idle curiosity. Something about her directness, her willingness to care about a stranger, broke through his carefully maintained walls. "I see doctors 3 times a week," he admitted quietly. "Dialysis. My kidneys are failing." Maya felt her breath catch. The word dialysis brought back a flood of memories from her father's illness. The machines, the tubes, the gradual acceptance that time was running out. She reached across the table instinctively, covering his hand with hers. "How long have you been on the transplant list?" 18 months. "My blood type is B negative, which doesn't help the odds." Marcus found himself sharing more than he had intended. There was something about Maya's presence that made honesty feel safe. "B negative," Maya repeated, her mind racing. She had donated blood since college and knew her type well. A B positive, universal plasma donor, but she could receive from any blood type. More importantly, she remembered the pamphlets from the blood drive about organ donation, how living donors could give kidneys and continue living normal, healthy lives. The conversation was interrupted by the breakfast rush, but Maya's thoughts kept returning to the man in the corner booth. She served coffee and took orders on autopilot, her mind churning with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to fully consider. During her break, she found herself Googling kidney donation on her phone, reading about compatibility tests and surgical procedures. Marcus finished half his toast and none of his eggs before leaving his usual tip and making his way slowly to the door. Maya watched him go, noting how he paused to catch his breath before stepping into the rain. The image stayed with her for the rest of her shift. That evening, Maya sat in her tiny apartment with her laptop open, diving deeper into research about living kidney donation. She learned about the extensive testing process, the recovery time, the risks and benefits. She read testimonials from donors who described the procedure as one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. The more she read, the more convinced she became that this was something she needed to explore. The next Tuesday, Marcus looked even worse. His hands shook as he lifted his coffee cup, and Maya noticed he had to pause twice while walking from the door to his booth. She made her decision during the lunch lull, sliding into the seat across from him with 2 cups of fresh coffee. "I want to get tested," she said without preamble. Marcus looked up from his untouched sandwich, confusion flickering across his features. "Tested for what?" "To see if I'm a match." "For kidney donation." The words came out in a rush, as if speaking them quickly would make them easier to process. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, his expression cycling through disbelief, gratitude, and concern. "Maya, you don't understand what you're saying. This isn't something you decide on a whim. The surgery, the recovery, the risks." "I've done my research," she interrupted. "I know what's involved. I know you don't know me very well, and I don't know you, but I can't just watch you fade away when there might be something I can do to help." The conversation that followed lasted through Maya's entire break and into the beginning of the dinner shift. Marcus tried to dissuade her, explaining the complexity of the testing process, the possibility of complications, the fact that she would be sacrificing part of herself for someone who was essentially a stranger. But Maya had. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Made up her mind with the same quiet determination that had carried her through nursing school and countless double shifts. "Why?" Marcus finally asked. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Maya was quiet for a moment, stirring sugar into her coffee even though she drank it black. "My father died of complications from diabetes. His kidneys failed in the end, and we couldn't find a donor in time. I watched him disappear piece by piece, and I swore that if I ever had the chance to prevent someone else from going through that, I would take it." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. The simple honesty of her explanation, the selfless courage it represented, overwhelmed him. He had grown accustomed to facing his illness alone, managing the fear and uncertainty without burdening others. The idea that someone would willingly share that burden seemed almost too good to believe. "I need you to think about this for at least a week," he said finally. "Talk to your family, research the hospitals, understand what you're considering. If you still want to move forward after that, I'll give you my doctor's information." Maya agreed, though she knew her mind wouldn't change. That night, she called her mother in Phoenix and her brother across town, explaining the situation and her decision. Both were initially shocked, then concerned about the risks and the wisdom of helping a virtual stranger. But as Maya explained her reasoning, they came to understand that this was something she needed to do, not just for Marcus, but for herself. The testing process began 3 weeks later at St. Mary's Medical Center, a sprawling complex on the north side of the city. Maya took a leave of absence from the diner, using her saved vacation time and unpaid days off to accommodate the extensive medical appointments. Blood tests, psychological evaluations, meetings with social workers, imaging studies, each step designed to ensure she was physically and emotionally prepared for what lay ahead. Marcus accompanied her to several appointments, still struggling to believe that this was really happening. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about the initial compatibility tests, though they warned that many potential donations were ruled out in the later stages of evaluation. Both Maya and Marcus found themselves afraid to hope too much, even as they grew closer through the shared experience of navigating the medical system. It was during one of these hospital visits that Maya first noticed the deference with which the staff treated Marcus. Nurses who barely acknowledged her presence brightened visibly when they saw him. Doctors who had seemed rushed suddenly had time for extended conversations. Even the parking attendant waved them through without collecting the usual fee. "Do you come here often for your dialysis?" she asked as they waited for her latest round of test results. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the waiting room chair. "Actually, I receive treatment at the university hospital across town. I only come here for the transplant program." The answer felt incomplete, but Maya didn't press for details. Everyone deserved their privacy, and she was focused entirely on making sure she could help him, regardless of any other circumstances. The phone call came on a rainy Thursday morning in November. Maya was studying for her pathophysiology exam when Dr. Sarah Patel, the transplant coordinator, delivered the news she had been hoping for. The final compatibility tests had come back positive. Maya was indeed a suitable donor for Marcus, and if they both still wanted to proceed, the surgery could be scheduled for the following month. Maya called Marcus immediately, her voice shaking with excitement and nervous energy. They agreed to meet at the diner that afternoon to discuss the final details and timeline. When Marcus arrived, Maya could see the weight of hope and fear battling in his expression. The possibility of a normal life, of waking up without the constant reminder of failing organs, was almost too much to contemplate. They spent 2 hours at his usual corner booth, talking through the logistics of the surgery and recovery period. Maya would need at least 6 weeks off work, possibly longer depending on how well she healed. The financial strain would be significant, especially with her reduced income and the ongoing costs of school. But she had managed tight budgets before. It was Maya's manager, Rosa, who first suggested the fundraiser. When Maya explained why she needed extended time off, Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Within hours, Rosa had organized a coffee can collection at the diner, reached out to local businesses for donations, and created a simple website to share Maya's story with the broader community. The response was overwhelming. Regular customers left larger tips and extra donations. The bookstore next door held a benefit reading. The flower shop donated arrangements for a silent auction. People Maya had never met sent checks with notes of encouragement and gratitude. The local newspaper picked up the story, and suddenly Maya found herself reluctantly in the spotlight as an example of everyday heroism. Marcus watched the community rally around Maya with a mixture of gratitude and growing unease. He wanted to contribute to her fundraiser, to help offset the financial burden she was taking on for his sake, but his own situation was complicated in ways he hadn't shared with her. Every time he considered telling her the truth about who he was and what he could afford to contribute, something held him back. The surgery was scheduled for December 15th, a Friday morning that would give them both the weekend to begin recovery before the hospital's weekday rush. Maya spent the week before the procedure getting her affairs in order, arranging for someone to water her plants, paying bills in advance, and finishing her semester exams early. The nursing program administrators had been supportive of her decision, even offering to help her maintain her academic standing during her recovery period. Marcus underwent his final pre-surgical preparations, including dialysis sessions designed to optimize his condition for the transplant. His energy was at its lowest point, and he struggled with basic activities like climbing stairs or carrying groceries. The knowledge that relief was just days away made the waiting almost unbearable. The night before surgery, Maya couldn't sleep. She sat in her apartment window, watching the snow fall on the empty street below, thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. 6 months ago, Marcus had been just another regular customer. Now she was about to give him part of herself, literally and figuratively. The magnitude of what they were about to share felt both terrifying and profound. Marcus spent his final evening writing letters he hoped he would never need to send, thank you notes to Maya, messages for his estranged sister in California, instructions for his affairs if something went wrong during surgery. The statistical risks were low, but the human cost of complications was absolute. As he sealed the envelopes, he made a promise to himself that if this transplant gave him a second chance at life, he would find a way to ensure Maya never regretted her sacrifice. Surgery day arrived gray and cold, with fresh snow covering the hospital parking lot. Maya arrived at 5:30 in the morning for pre-operative preparation, accompanied by her brother and her mother, who had flown in from Phoenix despite her own health concerns. Marcus came alone, as he had for most of his medical appointments over the past 2 years. The pre-operative area buzzed with quiet efficiency. Nurses started IV lines, anesthesiologists reviewed medical histories, and surgeons made their final assessments. Maya and Marcus were in adjacent preparation bays, separated by a thin curtain that allowed them to talk while the medical teams worked around them. "Any last-minute doubts?" Marcus asked, his voice slightly hoarse from the medication they had given him to calm his nerves. "None," Maya replied without hesitation. "You?" "Just gratitude. More than I know how to express." Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the lead transplant surgeon, stopped by both beds to review the procedure one final time. The surgery would take approximately 4 hours, with Maya's kidney being removed first and immediately transplanted into Marcus. Both patients would wake up in recovery, and if everything went according to plan, they would be sharing a hospital room by evening. As the orderlies prepared to wheel them into surgery, Maya reached through the curtain opening and found Marcus's hand. They held on for a moment without speaking, two people about to entrust their lives to each other in the most literal way possible. "See you on the other side," Maya whispered. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly, "for everything." The surgery proceeded without complications. Dr. Walsh and her team worked with practiced precision, removing Maya's left kidney through a small incision and preparing it for immediate transplant. In the adjacent operating room, Marcus's surgical team prepared the recipient site, carefully positioning the new kidney in his lower abdomen and connecting it to his blood vessels and ureter. Maya woke up first, groggy and sore but alert enough to ask about Marcus's condition. The recovery nurse assured her that the transplant had been successful and that Marcus's new kidney was already producing urine, a positive sign that the organ was functioning properly. The relief Maya felt was physical, a release of tension she hadn't realized she had been carrying. Marcus emerged from anesthesia 2 hours later, his first sensation, the absence of the familiar ache that had lived in his back and sides for months. The dialysis had managed his symptoms but never eliminated the underlying discomfort of organ failure. For the first time in over a year, he felt truly comfortable in his own body. They were moved to a shared recovery room that evening, both propped up in adjustable beds with IV poles and monitoring equipment surrounding them like electronic guardians. Maya was tired but alert, while Marcus seemed almost euphoric with relief and medication. "How do you feel?" Maya asked, adjusting her position carefully to avoid pulling at her incision. "Like I've been given my life back," Marcus replied. "I can't remember the last time I felt this clear-headed." They talked quietly through the evening, sharing stories they had never had time for during their brief diner encounters. Maya learned that Marcus had grown up in San Francisco, studied computer science at Berkeley, and moved to their city for a job that had ended when his health declined. Marcus discovered that Maya had originally wanted to be a veterinarian before financial constraints led her toward nursing, that she volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends, and that she had once driven cross-country in a car, held together with duct tape and determination. The next morning brought visits from the transplant team, physical therapists, and a parade of nurses monitoring their progress. Both patients were healing well, with Marcus's new kidney functioning at better-than-expected levels. The doctors were optimistic about his long-term prognosis, assuming he maintained his immunosuppressive medication regimen and attended regular follow-up appointments. Maya's recovery was progressing normally, though she would need several more days in the hospital before being discharged. The pain was manageable with medication, and the surgical team expected her to make a full recovery within 6 to 8 weeks. She would have some dietary and activity restrictions during the healing process, but her remaining kidney would compensate completely for the donated organ. It was during Maya's 3rd day in the hospital that she began to notice the unusual attention Marcus was receiving. Hospital administrators stopped by to check on his progress personally. The head of the transplant program made daily rounds despite having dozens of other patients. Even the hospital president appeared one morning, ostensibly to review the surgical wing but clearly focused on Marcus's room. "You must have really good insurance," Maya commented after the latest high-level visit. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "It's complicated." Before Maya could ask for clarification, Dr. Patel entered with Maya's discharge paperwork. She would be going home that afternoon with pain medication, wound care instructions, and a follow-up appointment schedule. The transition from patient to recovery mode felt sudden, despite having anticipated this moment for days. Marcus would remain hospitalized for several more days while his new kidneys stabilized and his medication levels were optimized. The separation felt strange after sharing the intense experience of surgery and early recovery. They exchanged phone numbers and promised to stay in touch during their respective healing processes. Maya's brother drove her home to her studio apartment, which felt simultaneously familiar and foreign after her hospital stay. The flower shop owner had filled her space with cheerful arrangements, and her refrigerator had been stocked with easy-to-prepare meals courtesy of Rosa and the diner staff. The outpouring of community support continued to overwhelm her. The first week at home passed slowly. Maya slept more than she had in years, her body directing all available energy toward healing. She walked short distances around her neighborhood, gradually building back her strength and endurance. The wound site was tender but healing well, and she found herself counting down the days until she could return to her normal activities. Marcus called every few days to update her on his progress and express his gratitude for her sacrifice. His improvement was remarkable. Within a week of surgery, his color had returned to normal. His energy levels were climbing steadily, and the mental fog that had plagued him for months was completely gone. The transformation was so dramatic that even his doctors seemed surprised by the rapid recovery. It was during one of these phone conversations that Maya mentioned her financial concerns about the extended time off work. Despite the community fundraiser, the loss of income and ongoing medical expenses were straining her budget. She was particularly worried about affording her spring semester tuition, which was due in 6 weeks. "I wish I could help more," Marcus said, and Maya could hear the frustration in his voice. "I feel terrible that you're dealing with financial stress because of your decision to help me." "That's not your responsibility," Maya insisted. "I knew what I was getting into when I decided to donate. The money will work itself out somehow." But Marcus couldn't let the matter rest. After hanging up the phone, he sat in his apartment staring at his laptop screen, wrestling with a decision he had been avoiding for weeks. The time had come to tell Maya the truth about who he was and what he could afford to do for her. The conversation would be difficult, but his conscience wouldn't allow him to remain silent while she struggled financially because of her selfless decision. The next morning, Marcus called Maya and asked if he could visit her apartment. He had something important to discuss, something he should have shared with her weeks ago. Maya agreed, though she was curious about the serious tone in his voice. Marcus arrived that afternoon carrying a manila envelope and wearing an expression of nervous determination. Maya invited him in, noting how much healthier he looked compared to their early encounters at the diner. The transformation was remarkable, and she felt a deep satisfaction knowing she had played a part in his recovery. "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus began, settling carefully into the chair across from her small couch. "Something I should have shared before the surgery, but I was afraid it would complicate your decision." Maya waited, sensing that whatever he was about to reveal would change the dynamic between them. "I'm not just a software consultant," Marcus continued. "That's what I do for work, but it's not my primary source of income. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm the founder and primary benefactor of the Chen Foundation for Medical Research." The name sounded familiar to Maya, though she couldn't immediately place it. Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out several documents, including financial statements and tax records that showed assets in the tens of millions. The Chen Foundation has donated over $50 million to medical institutions over the past decade, Marcus explained. $50 million of that has gone specifically to St. Mary's Medical Center, where we had our surgery. I'm their largest private donor. Maya stared at the papers, her mind struggling to process this information. The quiet man who ordered coffee and toast twice a week, who looked increasingly frail over the months she had known him, was apparently one of the city's most significant philanthropists. "I made my money in software development and investing," Marcus continued. "When my mother died from the same kidney disease I inherited, I decided to dedicate my wealth to medical research and patient care. The foundation has funded kidney disease research, transplant programs, and patient support services." The implications of this revelation began to sink in. Maya thought about the hospital staff's deference, the administrator visits, the special attention Marcus had received throughout their treatment. She also realized that he had the financial means to easily cover her medical expenses and lost income, yet he had allowed her to struggle with fundraisers and budget concerns. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Maya asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Because I was afraid you would donate for the wrong reasons," Marcus replied honestly. "I needed to know that your decision was based on compassion, not financial incentive. Too many people have tried to get close to me because of my money. I wanted our relationship to be genuine." Maya stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the street where she had seen Marcus struggle to his car so many times. The man she had thought she was helping was actually in a position to help far more people than she could ever reach. The irony was not lost on her. "I understand why you kept it secret initially," she said finally. "But after I committed to the donation, after the surgery, you should have told me. Watching me worry about money while you could have solved that problem easily, that doesn't feel genuine to me." Marcus nodded, accepting the criticism. "You're absolutely right. I was selfish. I was so grateful for your gift that I didn't want to risk changing the dynamic between us. But that was wrong." He pulled another document from the envelope, a cashier's check made out to Maya for $50,000. "This doesn't begin to compensate you for what you've given me," Marcus said, "but it should cover your medical expenses, lost income, and tuition costs. I also want to establish a scholarship fund in your name for nursing students who demonstrate exceptional compassion and service." Maya looked at the check, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The money would solve her immediate problems and secure her educational future, but it also complicated her feelings about the donation. She had given her kidney freely, without expectation of reward beyond the satisfaction of helping someone in need. The financial windfall felt both generous and somehow diminishing to the purity of her original motivation. "I need some time to think about this," Maya said, setting the check on her coffee table without picking it up. Marcus understood. "Of course. I'll leave everything here for you to consider. I just want you to know that my gratitude is real, regardless of my financial situation. What you did for me, the courage and selflessness you showed, that can't be bought or replicated. You saved my life, and you did it for all the right reasons." After Marcus left, Maya sat alone in her apartment, staring at the documents spread across her table. The check represented financial security she had never experienced, the ability to finish nursing school without debt, and perhaps even pursue advanced degrees. The scholarship fund would help other students who shared her commitment to caring for others. But she also felt a sense of betrayal, a recognition that their relationship had been built on incomplete honesty. Marcus had allowed her to see him as vulnerable and dependent when he actually possessed resources that dwarfed her own. The power dynamic between them had been false from the beginning, even if unintentionally so. Maya spent the evening calling her mother and brother, explaining the situation and asking for their perspectives. Both were initially shocked by the revelation of Marcus's wealth, then pleased about the financial windfall. But they also understood Maya's conflicted feelings about accepting money for what she had always viewed as a gift freely given. "The question isn't whether he can afford to give you this money," her mother said during their long phone conversation. "The question is whether accepting it aligns with your values and your reasons for donating in the first place." Maya's brother was more pragmatic. "You gave him a kidney out of kindness. He's offering you money out of gratitude. Both gestures can be genuine without canceling each other out." Over the next few days, Maya wrestled with her decision. She researched the Chen Foundation online, reading about the medical research projects and patient support programs Marcus had funded. The work was impressive and clearly motivated by a desire to prevent others from experiencing the loss and suffering he had endured. His philanthropy seemed genuine, not just an obligation or a tax strategy. She also considered her own goals and the impact the money could have on her ability to help others in the future. With financial security, she could focus entirely on her studies and clinical training. She could potentially specialize in transplant nursing, using her unique perspective as a donor to better serve patients facing similar decisions. Maya called Marcus a week after his visit, asking him to meet her at the diner where their story had begun. Rosa welcomed them both warmly, insisting on preparing their meals personally despite being swamped with the lunch rush. They sat in Marcus's usual corner booth, Roles reversed now that Maya was the one with something important to share. "I've decided to accept your offer," Maya said, "but with conditions." Marcus nodded, prepared to agree to whatever terms she set. "First, I want to be involved in establishing the scholarship fund. I want to help select recipients and maybe even mentor some of the students." "Absolutely. I was hoping you would want to be actively involved." "Second, I want the foundation to consider funding a support program for living organ donors. There are financial and emotional needs that aren't well addressed by the current system." Marcus smiled. "That's an excellent idea. We could develop comprehensive support services, maybe even advocate for policy changes." "And third," Maya continued, "I want us to be honest with each other going forward. No more secrets about who we are or what we're dealing with. If we're going to have any kind of relationship, it has to be built on complete transparency." "Agreed," Marcus said without hesitation. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning." Maya reached across the table and picked up the coffee cup Rosa had filled for her, inhaling the familiar aroma that had defined so many of their early interactions. "So, where do we go from here?" she asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. Their relationship had evolved from customer and server, to patient and donor, to something more complex and meaningful. The kidney transplant had created a permanent connection between them, but the revelation about his wealth had forced them to re-examine the foundation of their bond. "I'd like us to be friends," Marcus said. "Real friends, who know each other completely and support each other honestly. I'd like to work together on the foundation projects, and I'd like to be there for you the way you were there for me." Maya smiled for the first time since learning about Marcus's secret. "I'd like that too. But you're buying lunch today." Marcus laughed, a sound Maya realized she had rarely heard from him during their months of acquaintance. The man, who had seemed so burdened and isolated at their first meeting, was becoming someone lighter, more open to connection and joy. They spent 2 hours at the diner, talking about their plans for the foundation projects and their personal goals for the coming year. Marcus wanted to gradually return to active management of his business interests, while expanding the foundation's medical research portfolio. Maya was eager to complete her nursing degree and explore specialization opportunities in transplant medicine. As they prepared to leave, Rosa approached their table with a small wrapped package. "This is for both of you," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "A little something to remember where your story started." Inside the package were 2 coffee mugs, each decorated with a simple heart design and the words, "Kindness Shared," printed in Rosa's careful handwriting. "The first day you sat down with him instead of just serving coffee," Rosa told Maya, "I knew something special was happening. You two have shown this whole community what it means to care for each other." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes as she hugged Rosa goodbye. The diner had been more than just her workplace. It had been the setting for the most meaningful relationship of her life. Even though she would be returning to work part-time while finishing school, she knew that her connection to this place had been permanently transformed. Marcus walked Maya to her car, moving easily without the labored breathing and frequent stops that had characterized his movements for months. The physical transformation was remarkable, but Maya was more impressed by the emotional openness he was beginning to show. The man who had eaten alone in the corner booth for 2 years was learning to let people into his life. "Thank you," Maya said as they reached her car. "Not just for the money, though that means more than I can express. Thank you for trusting me with your story, even the parts you were afraid to share." "Thank you for seeing me as someone worth saving," Marcus replied, "and for teaching me that accepting help doesn't make me weak." They hugged goodbye, carefully mindful of Maya's still healing incision. As Maya drove home, she reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them to this point. 6 months ago, she had been a waitress studying nursing part-time and worrying about tuition payments. Now she was a kidney donor, a scholarship fund namesake, and a partner in medical philanthropy. The transformation felt surreal, but it also felt earned. Maya had made choices based on compassion and courage, even when the outcome was uncertain. Marcus had learned to trust others with his vulnerability and to use his resources in service of genuine connections rather than just charitable obligations. Over the following months, their friendship deepened as they worked together on foundation projects. Maya finished her nursing degree with honors, using the scholarship money to eliminate her student debt and even pursue additional certifications in transplant nursing. She began working part-time at St. Mary's Medical Center, providing support and education to patients considering organ donation. Marcus's health continued to improve dramatically. His energy levels returned to normal, allowing him to resume hiking and traveling, activities he had given up during his illness. More importantly, his capacity for relationships expanded as he learned to balance his philanthropic interests with personal connections. The scholarship fund they established together supported dozens of nursing students over the years, with Maya serving as an active mentor and advisor. Many of the recipients went on to specialize in organ transplant care, creating a ripple effect of expertise and compassion that extended far beyond Maya's original decision to donate. The Living Donor Support Program became one of the Foundation's most successful initiatives, providing financial assistance, counseling services, and peer support networks for people considering organ donation. Maya's unique perspective as both a care provider and a donor made her an invaluable advocate for policy changes that better protected and supported living donors. 5 years after the transplant, Maya and Marcus were invited to speak at a national conference on organ donation. They shared the stage to tell their story, emphasizing the importance of genuine human connection in medical decision-making. Maya talked about the moment she decided to get tested, the clarity she felt about helping someone in need. Marcus discussed his initial reluctance to accept help, and his gradual understanding that allowing others to care for him was actually a gift he could give in return. The audience of medical professionals, potential donors, and transplant recipients responded with a standing ovation. After their presentation, dozens of people approached them to share their own stories of organ donation and to express gratitude for the hope their partnership represented. That evening, Maya and Marcus sat in the hotel bar, celebrating the success of their presentation and reflecting on the journey that had brought them there. Maya was now a nurse practitioner, specializing in transplant medicine, and Marcus had expanded the Foundation's work to include international kidney disease research partnerships. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come to the diner that morning when I was so sick?" Marcus asked, swirling the ice in his club soda. Maya considered the question. "I think we would have found each other somehow. People who are meant to help each other have a way of crossing paths. Even if I had never told you about my illness? Especially then, the best connections happen when people choose to care about each other without any expectation of benefit." Marcus smiled, thinking about the scared, lonely man he had been 5 years earlier. The transformation hadn't been just physical. Receiving Maya's kidney had opened him to possibilities for connection and purpose that extended far beyond his medical needs. "I have something to tell you," Marcus said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Maya raised an eyebrow, remembering their conversation about honesty and transparency. "Nothing dramatic this time," he assured her. "I've been working with the hospital to establish a permanent endowment for transplant research. They want to name it the Maya Rodriguez Center for Living Donor Support." Maya stared at him, momentarily speechless. Having a medical center named in her honor felt surreal, a recognition she had never imagined when she first decided to get tested as a potential donor. "The dedication ceremony is next month," Marcus continued. "I hope you'll agree to have your name on the building. Only if you promise this is the last surprise," Maya said, though she was smiling through tears of gratitude. Marcus raised his glass in a toast. 2 second chances and the courage to take them. Maya clinked her glass against his. "To finding family in unexpected places." They sat together in comfortable silence, 2 people whose lives had been forever intertwined by an act of selfless love. What had begun as a simple question about leftovers had become a story of transformation, proving that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most ordinary moments of human kindness. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.